This is it. The album I've waited 4 years for. A lot of you have as well. This is Mute Math's new album, Vitals. I. It's one of the craziest things about this band. You got to admire the balls on a band like Mute Math, where they can reinvent themselves entirely 4 different times with 4 different styles and knock it dead 4 different times. Sorry, spoilers on the review ahead. But it's just really ballsy that a band can do that. When you're like hearing that a band is doing an entirely new direction, you can't help as a fan but get nervous. I mean, you don't want them to do the same thing a la Nickelback. But you don't ever want them to be like, oh, that whole thing we worked with, we're not going to do anything like that anymore. We're doing something completely different. And especially when you hear that the new style is going to be, disco pop. I was just like, what? What was that last bit? I mean, they've conquered a lot of different subjects. The first album being a synth pop album, the second one more being more alt rock. Third album was blues rock with a lot of different influences, and this is a more streamlined disco pop 80s album, and it really is. But it's interesting because the first time I heard the lead single Monument, I was not blown away by it, and I was shocked that I wasn't blown away by it because I love Mute Math. But when then I heard the whole album as a whole, I understood in a way that I don't think I ever would have if I just heard the song by itself. It's still my least favorite, don't get me wrong. The rest of the album I think is better songs than Monument. But it really doesn't, it belongs where it is. Probably shouldn't have been the single. Anyway, let's go into some history on the band Mute Math. Mute Math are an alt-rock band from New Orleans that started in 2003, consists of Paul Meany on vocals and keyboards. Sometimes guitar though, let's be honest. Drummer extraordinaire, Darren King, beast. Guitarist, Todd Gunnerman, and bassist, Roy Mitchell Cardenas. They perform in a lot of different styles from the 60s, heavily dancey 70s, and soul psychedelic rock, as well as, the millennial rock synth pop. They started up in 2002 as a long-distance collaboration between Paul Meany of New Orleans and Darren King of Springfield, Missouri. The two had known each other from work together on Meany's band Earthsuit. Occasionally, Paul would receive demos from Darren, and fairly impressed with his efforts, Paul contacted Darren and asked if he could mess with the demos and adding a bit of ideas. Darren agreed, and the two set in motion a ping-pong match that would carry on for several months. In February of 2002, Darren moved to New Orleans to closer work with Paul in hopes to at least turn their efforts into some kind of side project, calling it Math. They explored and shared influences ranging from DJ Shadow to Bjork, yelling a lot of earlier works to sample electronica. After Meany's other band officially broke up that summer, Darren and Paul moved in together into a house in Mendel, Louisiana, and spent all their time with new songs. Consider the side project a full band. In 2003, they recruited Greg Hill, another Springfield musician, and Darren's friend, and the three worked together on a bunch of songs, making a hybrid. Paul took the early demos to Ted T, who fell in love with them on first listen, and they worked up to an EP, Reset. After a few months, Reset was released on Teleprompt Records, and it was a huge deal. They worked together with Warner Music, and Mute Math's EP Reset would be a huge breaking point. Through social networking on MySpace and such, they spread the word of this group. Their fan base grew from there to sell out shows by the time spring 2005 came around. They would tour with bands such as May and Circa Survive, and that was very early in the EP stage. From that, then they set on a full tour in support of their self-titled debut, which was released in 2007. The huge song from there, of course, everybody knows that Mute Math created, just blown out song Typical. It was on the radio all the time in 2007. From there, Typical was on YouTube, and it just exploded. This band created a huge fan base and appeared on all the late night shows, going to all the music festivals, appeared music in the Transformers theme. I mean, they really exploded when Typical came out, and it was a big moment for them. Following that, they put out an EP called Spotlight in 2009, used on the Twilight soundtrack. Crazy, I know. But after that, they made Armistice. They went on their second full-length, which was put on Teleprompt Records in 2009, and they continued to gain huge momentum. Yeah, they actually said the group had almost called it quits when writing the album. Man had written 16 songs and spent 3 years on the road touring. Expected to cut the list down to 10 on their New Orleans home. but it was just a huge project, and the tension was ridiculous. Said during the search they met with producer, hearing his input, they decided to scrap all the previously written material and start from scratch. It's crazy. Bringing in a new producer to work with the material. 2009, King said in an interview that after taking a break for the holidays, they got back to recording, having done everything and so they could put out the new album. It worked much smoother this time, and the sophomore album came out. After that, the band again worked on their third album, which would be called Odd Soul, and it again changed styles for the third time. It was interesting. After that, they went to make Vitals, which of course became a huge 4-year gap because all of them got married and had kids, pretty much. So, let's get into some reviewing. This is Mute Math's fourth album. I wrote a review thing, but I don't, again, I'm a diehard Mute Math fan. I know this band. I can do this without it. They're honestly rare bands, and I know that a disco pop album sounds really just disgusting, but just give it a chance. Honestly, don't judge it before you listen. This band is capable of anything. They really are, and I mean that. I should have learned by now that anything is possible with this band, but I didn't until I heard this, and then I really realized they could do whatever. Could be a cover album of all Miley Cyrus songs, and be like, alright, let's do it. It'll be good. It's Mute Math. They open the album with Joyrides. It's an opening that's fast, and in seconds they know exactly style that is taken over. You hear it, and you just know. It's hugely danceable, synths all over the place. They follow with funky guitar lines and huge, catchy choruses. It's much more dancey than anything they've ever done before. Although it seems to be a theme of like 70s and 80s production, it's purely perfect production on top of the sound. It's just plain fun, disco sound or not. The layers here weave and build perfectly. It's an album highlight. I can't wait to see the song live. From there we get to Light Up, which is the standard static electric sounds layered with disco synths. The chorus, again, is huge. It's one of the most poppy sounds on the album, but it's still very undeniably a Mute Math sound. And here we've talked about Monument. It's the lead single. It's some sort of a dreamy weaving pop synth line into some crazy falsetto. It's a 70s style love song with some fun funk and soul vibes thrown in. I think the song fits way better with the rest of the album, but as a standalone single, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's a better choice to go to the next one, Used To. That's the standalone single of this album. The chorus steals the show, as with any other one on here. The synth coats Paul's voice in the floating state. It's permanently upbeat. It's got permanent upbeatness. Yeah, that word now. Honestly, it's probably my least favorite song on the album, but it's not a bad song. It just, I don't know. It just didn't stick out to me that much. I wouldn't have used it as the single. Stratosphere is a much slower, almost dream pop ballad that shows off Paul's vocals in a huge way, reminding me that, like some of the most early songs on the debut album up here, it's almost synth rock like it started, with the alt, of course, alt rock. But it's still very poppy. After that we get into All I See. It follows the dream pop sound from before and strips it back, just lets the vocals shine through a little in the background. It's an absolutely beautiful ballad. The range here is astounding. It's an almost wordless chorus that just kind of fades out as it echoes to the end. Then we get to Vital. This serves as, of course, every album that Mute Math has. They always have its instrumental track, sometimes 2 instrumental tracks like this one, where they can really show off the talent of the music and Darren King, drummer extraordinaire's beat skills, and this is not an exception to the rule. They finally let Darren off his leash. He's been very reserved here because of the electronic beat drums they use instead of real drums, but they let him off the leash here to just go nuts. And it's got some of the best instrumentals of the album, solid guitar lines and guitars and synths, but Darren on drums takes the absolute front seat for this one. Composed, Enter the Soul. I think they took a lesson from a Church of Soul on this one. He lays down the best vocals and range of the entire album. Again, they strip away a lot of the thick layers and synth, proving that they really don't need them to make a killer synth pop album. Next is Used To. The second lead single, and my favorite song of the album, absolutely should have been the first lead single. This song is as strong as anything they've ever written. It's different, completely different from anything they've written, but as strong for sure. It's a synth soul jam. This song, if it doesn't get you singing along to the chorus, then nothing will. They weave synth lines around this always chilling vocals of Paul's, and it really just works. It gives you chills listening to it. It's just beautiful. The next is Best of Intentions. It's the disco dance floor track they needed, bringing the dance beat back and laying it over a funky guitar line. This song gets stuck in your head. It really does. It's been driven by a funk guitar line and just great vocals. The next one is called Bulletproof. and it starts with a swirling synth background that lays down some of the most complex layered lines of the album. Again, it's instrumental, all of it, but it just rocks out with the full use of synth, and of course Darren just letting it loose. It's, you know, it kind of a lot of zany 80s keytar lines. Picture Paul Meany up there just rocking out on the keytar, because he does. Go see him live. The next one is Safe If We Don't Look Down. The song feels like it combines the sound of the albums, like all of the albums. It's got synth and dueling guitars, but it's more densely layered like the first album. I don't know, it's also more of a pop territory, so you gotta remember that this is that sound. It's more poppy. So it's like the new album, but it's also like combining the first album they wrote. To me, anyway. The final song is Remain. It's, I don't know, it's probably the best ballad they've ever written. Paul reaches for new heights here, as I wouldn't expect him to be able to top himself. On this album, vocal-wise, he's topped himself again and again and again. You hear it, you're like, that's the best one he's done. The next time, that's the best one he's done. And you get to Remain, and you're like, okay, nope, this one. This is the one. He just kicks its absolute ass here. It is the best vocals he's done, period. It starts off with sparse synthesizers in the background, before expanding and adding in a huge chorus at the end. It's a slower song, but don't get them wrong. They still make room for a huge chorus. This band amazes me. 4 albums, 4 styles, and 4 hit records. I was extremely nervous when I heard Monument. I had, like I said, a poppy direction with disco influences, but why not? That's why they can do that kind of thing, because they're Mute Math. Not another band on the planet would say that, and I would not be nervous. But I shouldn't have been for them, because they've been able to do it 3 times before. I mean, it wasn't, when they say blues rock, you're like, yeah, let's hear it, or the first album you didn't know, so you didn't know what to expect. The second one, alt rock, alright, let's do it. Synth pop, though, I don't know. But they pull it off. I wasn't a fan initially of the new direction, but when I heard the album, I have to give them props. They pulled it off. They pulled off a modern-day indie pop disco album, and it's great. That's a really tough thing for them to me to admit to, because that doesn't happen. The next closest album to try and pull that off was Broken Bells last year with After the Disco, and they did a decent job, but this is better. I don't know. This is just a really strange band. They have a very unique flavor, even with it being a pop album. They have alternative instruments and styles that only Mute Math can do, and they're just great at making their own flavor, even with a very different style of album. Even though it sounds nothing like the last one, you still hear it and you're like, yeah, that's Mute Math. They add these huge funky guitar lines, catchy choruses, and wonderful electronic drum beats of Darren. I do feel like, because of the new style and the electric beats, one of the big takeaways, and one of the only things you could say bad about the album, is that Darren is left out a little too much because they use electronic beats. And it's a shame, because he's one of the best drummers in the world. He really is. Go see him live. Has to duct tape his headphones to his head so they don't fall off, because he's drumming so freaking fast and loud. It's just a shame. Although it's poppier, it does get past that, because Paul Meany shines on vocals like never before, and more range than I think he's ever done, and it's beautiful. I guarantee you haven't heard a dance pop album from the 80s like this. People have told me they sound like Maroon 5 and they've sold out. I just hate that, because, seriously, just shut up. If Maroon 5 ever made anything this good, I would fangirl out about them too and buy every one of their records. But they haven't, so I won't. You know, in the bright spot, if you're not a fan of this style, it's like the weather in Iowa. Just wait around for a few minutes and the next one will be different. This, honestly, recommend Joyrides, Vitals, Used To, and Remain. 4 out of 5 stars. A little too poppy, a little too few Darren moments, but super solid album as a